was driven mad with a thirst for expansions.
Hey everybody, this is Strategywizard again. It's been a long time, I know, and hey, no better way to come back than part of what held me up so long, which is Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. This game is well known, it's popular, you probably know a lot about it already, but one thing you may not know is that not only is this game really expensive and, you know, it's a big deal to get into, but there's actually, you know, a limited number of scenarios that you can play in this game, and for some people that's a deal breaker. It's also app-driven. You have to have an app, and there's only so many scenarios in the game. So if that bothers you, I understand. That's, you know, that could be an issue for some people. But what you may not know is that there is another group of scenarios that are fan-made in this system called Valkyrie. So that could be something that might sway new people to want to try the game, because there's a lot more scenarios available than what just comes from Fantasy Flight Games. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and show you basically how to play, how the app works, and hopefully that'll get you enough information to where you can decide if the game sounds fun, assuming that you don't already know how to play. And then we'll go from there, and I'll tell you what I think.
So you're going to be on some type of adventure or an investigation. There's a mystery going on, and you're going to be picking your investigators to start. So there's a whole bunch of different investigators to choose from. Each one has their own special ability, a certain amount of health and sanity that you have to maintain to stay alive, and several stats including strength, agility, and observation. You can see the rest in the image. So you pick your investigator, you'll have a miniature to go with that investigator, and you will be ready to proceed on your adventure. Now, as you can, basically whenever you start, after you do this, that's really basically the initial setup. You're going to then go into the app, and the app is going to show you what tiles are going to go into place to start the building of the map. So really, there's very few games that have setup that's this simple. So you have your investigators, you get ready to go. You're going to choose investigators that hopefully you think will work well together. Depending on how many players you're playing with, that'll help you decide. But, you know, some have healing capabilities, some help each other, some are more focused on combat. You'll just have to decide what works best for you. The next basic part of setup is the tiles, so that make up the map that you're going to be exploring, and the app itself will do that for you, depending on which scenario you chose, and there's a certain amount of randomness in some cases of what the map setup will be like. It will tell you how to the starting tile or tiles, and then from there as you explore you will be getting new tiles on the board, so the map will get bigger, you can explore more and figure out what's going on for your particular investigation. So the tiles are a big part of the game, and there's a lot of different types. There's outside locations, inside locations, streets, mansions, grassy areas, and different expansions add different other types of areas if you are so inclined to purchase more. So there's a lot of different variety over as you buy more expansions, and you can see all kinds of different locales. And the tiles are great quality, by the way, and you'll notice typically there's different sizes, but typically they're this, you know, narrow size, and there's a white line that separates different actual spaces as far as movement goes, because you get to move 2 spaces per movement, and the white lines show you what designates a separate space. So as you go along exploring, you'll be able to experience, you know, lots of different interactions. It could be opening doors, searching little items and whatnot, or it could be just moving around fighting enemies. You get 2 actions per turn, and for those 2 actions you'll have so many different options, but you'll always feel like 2 actions is not enough because you have so many things to do and limited time to do it. One of the most important parts of the game as you proceed, apart from getting clues, investigating, and trying to find out what the goal of the game is and achieving that goal, is fighting enemies. So I've got lots of monsters here that come from many different expansions that I have bought, but there's a lot of different types of enemies, and although each one has the same basic functions, which is they spawn somewhere and then they will move towards you on their turn. After the investigator turn, the enemies get a turn. They'll move towards you and then they will try to attack you if they get within range. Some have range and some are melee only, and they will do some type of damage, and you might be able to avoid it, and you'll roll dice to protect yourself if you have the opportunity. And you'll be able to fight them on your turn. And so they have a certain amount of health. You're trying to attack them and wound them, and you can use weapons that you've picked up as items over the course of the game. So basically what it gets down to is, enemies are an obstacle that typically you don't just have to kill. They're more of something in the way to keep you from accomplishing your goal. If you can avoid them, you can evade and try to move on and accomplish your task without fighting them. But sometimes you have to, because if they keep hurting you, you have to get rid of them because they are dangerous a lot of the time. So enemies pose an interesting element. In a lot of games, killing enemies is the goal. Here, the enemies are maybe a necessity to kill at times, but if you can avoid it, sometimes it's worth it in order to just accomplish the investigation mission. Like any good dungeon crawler, the main mechanic for actually accomplishing things is dice rolling. So you have a bunch of 8-sided dice that come with 3 different sides. There's the Elder sign, which is a success. There's a blank, which is a failure. And then there's the magnifying glass, which represents the possibility of a success. So the dice rolling is really, you're going to be doing a lot of dice rolling in this game. There's going to be dice rolling for combat. There's dice rolling for skill tests. So let's say that you have to do something that involves your knowledge of arcane wisdom. Then you might do a lore check, in which case you look at your lore stat and you'll be rolling dice based on how many points of lore that you have. Same for will. So maybe something's going to scare you, but you have a will check to try to resist the horror. So you get to roll dice against that. Well, the cool part about the dice rolling here is it's not just you win or you lose, because the blank would be just lose and the Elder sign is just win. But if you roll the magnifying glass, you can spend your clue tokens that you've earned over the course of the game to convert them to successes. And then you have to be careful about when you use them. Sometimes you want to save those clue tokens for just the right key moment. And there's also puzzles in the game that you can play that you have to accomplish some little task. Maybe it's a slide puzzle or a stacking puzzle or an image that you have to put together. So there's different types of puzzles, and clue tokens can help you with those as well. So you have to decide, when do you really want to use those clue tokens? There's precious few, and you want to use them at the right time, but you can use them to help you with your dice rolls. So that's a cool mechanic, and it makes it to where the game stays interesting, because it's not just you rolled that and that's it. You have to make decisions once you've made your roll. As you proceed in your investigation, and at the beginning before you start, you'll also have the chance to get items, spells, and over the course of the game, you'll also possibly gain different conditions, which could be positive or negative. So there's a lot of cards that will represent these things for you. So you can collect items, you can get positive conditions to strengthen yourself, but you can also gain damage and horror, which could ultimately lead to your demise. So you need to be careful about how you go along and what items you let certain investigators have, because if someone's dying, you need to make sure you can reach somebody to pass them a healing item if you have one. But then as your damage and your horror comes up, if they ever get flipped face up, or if you receive them face up, normally the case would be that they're face down, in which case they don't have an effect. They just are contributing to you dying. But horror and damage can be flipped face up, which would then mean that you would have to deal with possibly some other implication of the damage or horror. And the text will tell you, sometimes it'll be a minor injury and you just flip it face down and no big deal. Or flip it back face down. But in other cases, it'll have some other real problem. And that's what you have to look out for. You could get claustrophobic, or you might have a fear of darkness, nyctophobia. And that's something that adds a lot of interest, because you don't know, whenever you take damage and horror, you don't know exactly what the implications are until you receive it. So some pretty crazy things can happen over the course of the game as you start getting hurt. And then once you've taken damage or horror equal to your health or sanity, that doesn't totally end it. Then you become wounded in the case of damage, or you become insane, in which case something actually, a lot of the time, some crazy insanity condition, well, it could even change your winning condition or make you even turn into a bad guy. So that's something that can also add some pretty crazy stuff. But the cool part about the insanity conditions is that, you never know what you're going to get. So if your horror hits, then, or in the case of wound damage, you get to the point where you've taken as much damage as your health, you will discard all of your face down horror or damage, depending on which one you just maxed out on. Then you get to go all the way back up, and once you have taken as much horror or damage as the case may be, equal to your maximum, then you die. So it's like you have 2 runs of being able to take damage and horror, but that's why face-up damage and horror is the worst, because it does not get discarded, and it will then continue to count towards your maximum for the second round of taking damage or horror to killing you. So you have to be very careful about that. Okay, so now we're actually getting to the app, which is where the real meat of the game is, because you can't play without it. This is going to give you a lot of good ambient background music, which is pretty handy. It's going to have a menu to start with where you can start a new game, continue a game that you've saved, and you can go to more, and you can add what expansions you have so the game knows what all it can include in one of your sessions. And which is good, because sometimes having new expansions can actually modify the old scenarios from the beginning. Now, there are a few there's an expansion icon here. You see the little tentacle. That tells you that this is for the base game. There are 4 scenarios that come with the base game, and there are different difficulty levels, different durations. And there's a lot of variety in the way these scenarios actually play out. They're not very samey, they're very different. So that's one of the cool things. Even though you only have 4, you still have a lot of variety here. Now, that being said, 4 may not seem like a lot, but as you keep buying expansions, you'll see that there are other scenarios that you can play, and there's even DLC that you can buy for, I think, $5 maybe. I've bought it for my tablet, but unfortunately for Steam I'd have to buy it separately, which I have not done here. But you can still buy these DLCs to be able to play more official official scenarios with the base game. But you can see with all the different expansions, you can have a whole bunch of different scenarios, various difficulty ratings, various time frames, and lots of different things going on, different plots. So that's the good news. There's a lot of variety here. So if you select investigators, now we can actually move on to starting a scenario, and depending on what expansions you have, it decides what people you have to choose from. We're going to choose Ashcan Pete, Agatha Crane, Akachi Onyele, and Charlie Kane. Now we're going to get started and see what happens once you have chosen your investigators. You will be given a list of items that you get to start with. Ashcan Pete always starts with a Duke, but all the other items and spells that you might start with can be shared as you wish among your investigators. Be careful who gets what, because some people will be better with different items. You have a certain starting number of clue tokens that each investigator gets. Then we move on. There's always a little flavor text here that can kind of get you in the mood. There was thunder in the air on the night. I went to the deserted mansion atop Tempest Mountain to find the lurking fear. Yeah, kind of gets you all nervous. Now you have a pretty handy little scenario. It tells you the initial plot. It has some good narration, but we'll skip that. We don't want to spoil too much. And we don't want to spoil too much here either, but I just want to kind of show you the way it introduces you to the game. It's going to show you the initial tile to place. It's going to show you with the initial tokens where they're going to be, search tokens and explore tokens. You'll put all these tokens out where it tells you. A barricade token goes there, which you can use to block a door. Then the investigator phase begins, and now you basically have the option to start playing. You get 2 actions per turn, so each investigator can take their actions to move around the room. They could go search some of the question marks. They could explore in the doors. They could talk to the person that's in the room. A lot of different options here. So it basically, you don't know at the beginning what the goal is. Whenever you start a scenario, unless you've already played it before, you don't know. You're wondering, and that's part of the real thrill is, just the wonder and the mystery of what are you supposed to be doing? What's going on in this particular scenario? So at the beginning, you really don't have a clue what to do. So you're just trying to search and find out, look through the doors, find out what you can. But the only thing is, you typically have a limited amount of time and that is what makes things kind of nerve-wracking. You don't know how much time you have. The game doesn't tell you have this many rounds. It'll give you warning sometimes at the end, and you just, or as you're getting closer to running out of time, and then you know, okay, I got to really hurry up. So you have to be careful with your actions. Sometimes it's just not worth looking at something that's there's an end table. What do? Or you talk to someone. What questions do you ask them? Sometimes you have to be very careful about what choices you make, because you could be wasting your time. That being said, there's lots of doors to go explore, so you'll expand the mansion as you go along, and then who knows where you'll end up. And you'll be splitting your party up, so that depending on how many players you have, if you only have 2, it takes longer to explore, but they typically give you more time to accomplish the mission. But if you have more players, you can get more done, but you don't want to split up too much, because sometimes you might need to share items together or work together to accomplish some of your tasks, to be more efficient anyway. Now, apart from that, you should also know that whenever you're done, you can click the little arrow in the bottom right, and that will give you the opportunity to end your turn, let the mythos phase happen, where a lot of crazy bad things will typically occur, and the monster phase, if there were any monsters, would also get their turn, and then it would come back to the investigator's turn, and they can continue their investigation. So ultimately, that's the basics of how the app works. It gives you all this user interface so that you can figure out what to do, where to go, and basically build everything for you and be the dungeon keeper for you. But I don't want to show too much more, because really the more I show you, the worse it's going to get as far as spoiling things for you. I don't want to spoil too much, so we'll go ahead and leave that there, and you can discover more on your own. So Valkyrie is a fan-made thing that is an app or software that you can use to make your own scenarios that other people can play, which is pretty fascinating, to be honest. Now, it's got Descent Journeys in the Dark 2nd Edition as another option, which I don't have that game, so I don't have it downloaded, so I can't go there. But Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition I do have. So you click here. We have New Game, Continue, Select Content, basically all the same type of things that you would have on the official Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition app. So we go to New Game, and here you can see all the different scenarios that people have made. It'll give you the title, a little blurb about what you can expect to experience, and duration, average duration based on what people have actually experienced when they played, a difficulty rating that the designer of this scenario thinks it will be, pretty hard in this case, and then the average win ratio. So this gives you an idea of, hey, out of all the people who've played it, in this case there's 54 user reviews, people have, let's just say 54 people total have played it. Theoretically, someone might not have reviewed it, but let's just say everyone reviewed it. 54 user reviews, 85% of them won. So that gives you an idea. It's probably not too hard. And then we have this is like just a visual rating. You can play it here, but you can hear, like in the case of this blue thing down here, you can download it, and sometimes people will update scenarios, so you have to re-download it over time. But the point is, there's all kinds of scenarios in here, some of which I've made a few of them myself, and then lots of other people have made many others, and I have it sorted to where the highest rated ones are at the top and the lowest are at the bottom. But even some of the lower rated scenarios are actually, they are, in my opinion, entertaining and enjoyable. So here you can just see so many different scenarios that you can experience, and it tells you what expansions you have to have. In this case, this just means that you have to have the conversion kit from the original base game. Originally there was a conversion kit that would carry over stuff from Mansions of Madness 1st Edition, but I guess the most recent printing of Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition does not include the conversion kit, so that's just to let you know. But different ones have different expansion requirements. Some require a lot of expansions, some require a few, and some require none. So, like in this case, this one doesn't require anything at all, and this one doesn't require anything. So you get an idea of what you can, what you'll be able to play based with what you have. It also shows what languages each one is available in. Some of them have a lot of translations, and if you, let's just say we play one, I'll go ahead and choose one that I made just because I did the unspeakable one. So we'll go here, and you get to put in all this little flavor text. You start it, you pick your investigators just like you would in the original, and then it spits out Now there's not as much flair and flourish, but still, still functions the same. You get to see what items you're going to start with, and then some text of how many clue tokens and other little things.
The king in yellow. Everyone is talking about it.
I don't want to spoil too much here in this scenario. So even though the user interface is not as fancy, you have some of the same buttons that you could do before. It would show you whatever special items you can interact with, setting fire and eliminating your a character, and then there's a log that shows all that you've read up to this point. And apart from that, you have the tokens. Person tokens that have a face just have the name, and then the generic person tokens actually look like the token, and you'll be able to do everything else you could in the original scenarios, the official Fantasy Flight scenarios. Just not the same flourish, but there's a lot of unique and creative ideas that people have put into these scenarios, so I highly recommend you go in and check some of these out. And we'll go ahead and go back to the main menu, and I'll show you one other little thing about the editing. You can go to the scenario editor, and this is where you can actually make your own scenario. So let's just say, I haven't really done much with this one. I haven't come up with much of anything yet. Let's just say you start here. Now I'm just going to give a basic overview just so you can see if this is something that you're interested in, but I'm mainly reviewing the game, so I don't want to go too much into this. But this is a very robust editor that lets you create whatever you want. You can add tiles, tokens, spawns, which would be monsters, add events, which is really the key to the game, is events that make different things happen. You can add different user interfaces like images or custom images that you want to put in, add items and puzzles. So there are puzzles in here, and there are puzzles in the original game, which I didn't actually show any of those because that would have spoiled something, but there are little interactive puzzles that you can do that they've carried over into Valkyrie, which is pretty cool. So here you can, add events. Like you go here, you'd say new event, and in a given event you can basically give any kind of text you want the event to have. You can say what triggers it. Is it the very beginning of the game? Is it if someone got eliminated? Is it the end of the round, the start of the round, the mythos phase? You can do all that, and then you can make it to where it adds items and all that kind of good stuff. You can have triggers, and basically you use this is the building block of how you would make your own scenario. Now there's a handy dandy guide that would show you exactly how to do it, when it goes into tons of detail over all the different things. I had to read it to get the real grasp of how this works, because it's not super intuitive, I wouldn't say, but once you start getting into a rhythm, it all starts coming together and making sense. So this is another feature for those who are really interested. If you find that you really like the game, you might find that you want to jump over here and actually start making your own scenarios. However, I should warn you that making a good scenario probably takes, 48 hours of actual work to put it together, I would say, or more, depending on how fast you are at coming up with ideas and putting it together. But this is another option that I thought would be worthy of mentioning, because a lot of people don't know about Valkyrie, and some people don't buy Mansions of Madness precisely because there's only so many scenarios, and they feel like they're not getting their money's worth. Well, with this, you get a lot of other free content that you can enjoy that will extend the life of the game for you and your pals.
Okay, so you can see that there's a lot going on in this game, but I can't give you all the details because that would give away a lot of the surprise and the excitement and the thrill of discovery that this game offers. I mean, I would go as far as to say 80% of the real excitement comes from playing something for the first time, because you're trying to figure out what's going on, you're trying to figure out how to win and what's the best way, what's going on in the environment. That's a huge, huge excitement, and also even getting the new cards and fighting different enemies. The first time that all that happens, or getting new insanity conditions, that's all a thrill ride, because you never know what to expect. But I would still say, once you've played every scenario, there's still a lot of fun to be had in this game, because sometimes you want to test new investigators in a particular scenario to see how well you can do. Sometimes you want to see if you can do a better job than you did the first time, because sometimes there's different levels of winning in some scenarios where you can get a good ending or a great ending. And sometimes it's just fun to play them again anyway, regardless, even with the exact same characters and everything, just because the scenario itself is fun. There are certain scenarios that I really enjoy playing a lot more than others, and I would play them no problem repeatedly. I don't, just because the actual gameplay of the scenario is interesting and fun. So I think there is a lot of there's more replay value, I think, that maybe some people give it credit for, and the main reason is people think, or a lot of people feel like once you've played the scenarios, it's kind of dead. And I just don't think that's the case. I've played, I want to say I've played every single official scenario more than once, and I've played some of them several times, and I've enjoyed every single time I've played. But not only that, well, and of course there's the fact that, you know, certain maps are different every now and then. Some maps are always the same. Some maps have a chance of being different. There's a random generator that decides, I guess, what the map layout will be in the end. So that adds extra replayability. But even apart from that, it's just enjoyable. It's kind of like playing any cooperative game. You know, a lot of people like Pandemic. You play the same game, same basic thing over and over again, and people enjoy it all the time. To me, Mansions of Madness is very similar. I mean, you may know what the plot is, you may know what the goal is, but it's just like every other cooperative game in that sense, in my opinion, which is, yeah, you know what you're supposed to do, and you try to see if you can do it. And if you win, you win. If you don't, you don't. Yes, the narrative is not going to be as exciting because you already know. I understand all that, but I still think there's fun in trying to beat the scenario because they're challenging, and that's one of the things that makes it interesting to me is with the difficulty level as high as it is, you never know if you're going to win, and that's what makes it fun. So that being said, I should also say, because of the element of the Valkyrie software, you have so many more scenarios to dabble with, and of course, if you really get motivated, you can even make your own, which I've made several, as I've said, but that's another element that I find very enjoyable, is seeing what other people have come up with, what kind of stories and stuff, and some are better than others, which it should be expected, but it's just a really enjoyable game. Now, overall, how would I rate it? I would give it a 9 out of 10, and for a while, I felt like it was a 10 out of 10. The only reason why I don't think that it quite deserves that is two reasons. One, not some of the even the official scenarios have some glitches that make it to where they're not perfect. We've had one game where we couldn't win, even though we did everything we were supposed to do. It glitched, but we had beaten the same scenario before using the exact same method. So I don't know what happened. That's just one of the faults of software and, you know, any video game, and this has a video game element to it. So that's unfortunate, but apart from that, the only other reason why I wouldn't give it a 10, let's say you took that away, let's say you fixed all that, I still probably wouldn't give it a 10 because of the fact that you do lose some of the excitement after you've played each scenario. It's still fun, I still enjoy it, but it does lose some of the thrill ride that you get, the thrill of discovery. So once that's gone, still really fun to play, it just doesn't have that just amazingness that I like so much. So that being said, yes, 9 out of 10, still think it's highly recommended and very worthwhile, especially with Valkyrie available for so many scenarios that you can play even with just the base game, not even needing all the expansions, because there's many of the scenarios that don't need any expansions. So that's my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments. I appreciate you for watching, and have a good one. See y'all next time.